Hello, I am the Grub Street vlogger, and just got to the end of June. June fled by for me. I was mostly working during it, hence the rumpled shirt, Rumpelstiltskin, rumpled shirt, and it went very, very quickly. And I read a fair few books. Let's go. The first one was called The Time Regulation Institute by Ahmet, Hamdi, Tanpinar. And it's about a guy called Harry Erdal. Well, I pronounced it Harry. It's spelled Hayri. But Harry worked for me. And he eventually becomes the co-founder of the Time Regulation Institute. It's been described as a Menippean satire. That's a hard word to say. Menippean. Which is a satire of big schemes of thought. And he goes through several big schemes of thought. He starts off with old ones like alchemy, and then psychoanalysis, and then at the end he goes into sort of Western modernity and bureaucracy. And then that fails on him, and then he's sort of left hanging at the end of the book. I don't think the joke is so much about the different schemes of thought. I don't think it is doing this satire of schemes of thought. I think the joke is about identity, about Harry's identity, and then about Turkish identity, because this is a Turkish book translated from Turkish. In Turkey, around about the 40s and 50s, you've got the guy now known as Ataturk, whose real name I've forgotten, it was in the book, it's gone, who decided to make Turkey a secular state that was closer aligned to West than its Islamic roots. And so the Time Regulation Institute in this is supposed to be an institute that regulates time by making sure the clocks are on the Western time, but it's not really. It's a boondoggle, I think is the technical term for it. It exists to use up resources for its own self. However, the Time Regulation Institute itself doesn't really come into play until the last third quarter or so of the book. It's Harry telling you about his life, and he says this thing about what he valued most when he was a child was that he was free. But if you regard freedom as a political term, you've missed out what he means by free. And he never actually says what he means, but I think it's free from influence, because from then on he's given a watch, and the watch takes him to the watch seller, and from then on the watch seller influences him, and he becomes like a little copy of the watch seller, and then he gets passed on almost to this alchemist, and he becomes a little copy of the alchemist, and then he gets passed on to this spiritualist, and he becomes a little copy of them, and he gets passed on to a psychologist, and becomes, and so he doesn't have an identity that isn't heavily influenced by those around him, and even objects become imbued with the people. So when he puts on someone's jacket, he becomes like them. I think that's kind of a point about people, and about how we do become parts of the people who are around us. We all do this, though Harry does it more than most people. But I think it's also about Turkey. Turkey is, it was trying on its Islamic identity. It was this, and now it's trying on this modern Western identity. And what it needs to do is find its own identity, which the character in the book never really does. He thinks he does towards the end, because he meets this guy called Halit al-Yakadi, and he is the guy who forms the Time Regulation Institute. And Halit views life as a toy, as a game. He doesn't take anything seriously, so he enjoys this whole adopting of identities. He enjoys playing with it. He enjoys having no substance at the middle, really, of just being an accumulation of influences, and that's what makes him appeal to Harry, and Harry ends up copying him, and then he dies, and then Harry's at a loose end, and it's also all a bit loose at the end. It's a really funny book. Like, it's in both ways. There's some funny ha-ha and some funny peculiar. There's a load of really good set pieces. One of my favourites is about his aunt. His aunt is going to give him and his dad money when she dies, and then she dies, and so they sort the body out and they take her down to the burial, and then she wakes up, and she's very distressed, waking up, and storms back to the house dressed as a corpse, and evicts everyone from the house, and lives for another 20 years. That was a good piece. There's a lot of really good little things like that. There's a clock in there called the Blessed One, and the clock was designed to go in a mosque, but it never quite got there because they never had enough money to do up the mosque enough to put the clock in. So this clock follows them around, and it becomes almost a religious icon called the Blessed One, who people follow. And yeah, there are lots of things about clocks and time, obviously, called the Time Regulation Institute. If you want a plot that takes you and grips you and pulls you along, don't go for it. Nah, Time Regulation Institute is not for you. But if you want some good characters and some fun settings and, you know, a bit of fun, it reminded me a lot of sort of 100 Years of Solitude. You know, there are stories within that are quite tight, but the whole thing's sort of a baggy introduction to all these different characters and things. And this is a bit like that. And it was very, very good, and I very enjoyed it. And that is the Time Regulation Institute. Next. Impostures by al-Hariri. How many 11th century Islamic texts are translated with phrases like, I'm going to shank your nan, and references to Jeremy Beadle? I'm guessing only one. This one. So, the last one was Turkish. This one is Arabic, and it's sort of Syria and sort of Arabic-speaking lands in the 11th century. There's a map even of sort of Middle Easty type. Yeah, Oman, Yemen. Always love that Oman and Yemen together. So, yeah, this book's really, really interesting. It's I bought it just because it sounded so peculiar. So it's an 11th century work. Al-Hariri heard another guy doing this thing called Impostures, and they were short stories in which there's sort of a trickster character and a narrator character. And the narrator character overhears someone using amazing linguistic virtuosity in order to get themselves out of trouble or to win some sympathy or something to get something they want. And then he recognises, that's the trickster figure, and they have a little chat, and the trickster figure goes away. And that's it, that's an imposter. And al-Hariri went, all right, I'll do my own. And he put in a lot more tricks in there. So in the Arabic text, every single one is written in a rhymed prose, which is apparently quite a high class, difficult thing to do. So every one is written in that. But then some have extra things. So some include palindromes. So you can read the sentence forward and backwards, and there's paragraphs for each sentence is a palindrome, and it all kind of makes sense anyway. There are other palindromes which you read the words of a chunk, and then you read the words back, and they mean one thing that way, and they mean another thing that way, and they make sense both ways. And then he did these other things which are more sort of Arabic specific. So Arabic has dotted and undotted letters. So he'd write one all in dotted letters and one all in undotted letters, and then one where it's dotted, undotted, dotted, words with a dotted, words without, words with, words without. And so because the games are language games, languages don't work the same, this has been regarded as nigh untranslatable. And this guy, Michael Cooperson, made some interesting decisions when it came to translating it. Now he thought rhymed prose is not something English is very good at. But the key of the text, of the whole thing, is this is to celebrate Arabic and to celebrate language, but specifically Arabic because it's the language it's written in. And so a translation needs to put across the same meanings and the same thoughts and ideas, one in the content, but also in the form. And so a celebration of English. And so it becomes a celebration of Englishes. And so each chapter is written in a different style. There's some that are written in Kiwi slang, Australian slang, jive talk, from the 40s, the Cockney rhyming slang, multicultural London English, and then different authors. There's Boswell's got one, Johnson's got two, Chaucer's got one, Fielding's got one. And so each chapter is a different variety of English, which I really, really love. There's one that's partly in Patois. There's some in Niger. Some done like plays, and it's really good. So essentially, the story varies very little each time. There's 50 of them. It's there are little variations. Sometimes our trickster character Abu Zaid is in a court and he's arguing for something and he gets money that way. But sometimes he's just impressing a group of people around him to give him money. Sometimes he's tricking them. But essentially, it's always guy turns up, sees the fizzling linguistic excellence, realizes, oh, that's Abu Zaid, he's got a great mouth, but he doesn't use it for very good reasons, and then that's the end of the story. It would mean that this would get repetitive, but because of all those different types of English, it doesn't. And so when you're reading this, you're reading 4 different books in some ways. You're reading the Arabic text, and if the notes are correct, then the Arabic text is pretty closely followed in this. It's not like he's just making up his own version of this. He is translating it, but you get sort of the English text, but then you get the kind of English that the English text is being spoken through. And as he says, why is an accurate translation Arabic into standard English? Why would Arabic into Cockney rhyming slang not be a proper translation? It's from one language to another. It's retaining the meaning. And so you're reading, you got Cockney in your head, you got English book in your head, you got the Arabic book in your head, and then also at the end of every chapter he's got a little essay about his choices in that chapter. And that's where you kind of learn, oh, okay, this idiom here he's replaced with that idiom because that idiom fits. Though often he keeps the idioms the same, which can be a bit weird when you've got like people talking in patois about camels or things like that. But still, it's an impossible task, and he does it really, really well. I mean, the Johnson one doesn't particularly sound like Johnson to me as someone who's read a lot of Johnson, and the Henry Fielding one doesn't quite sound like Henry Fielding. But considering it's a translation from an 11th century Arabic text, using only words that are found in, say, Johnson or in Fielding, the fact that he then slightly misses the nuances of the rhythms of the Fielding and the Johnson seems such a small quibble to the amount that he does manage to succeed in this book. It's very impressive, and it's very entertaining, and it's unlike anything I've ever read, and I completely recommend it. Next. Well, I'd read 2 pretty long, heavy books. That one physically heavy. So, a little thin one. John Steinbeck, Cannery Row. What I did was I didn't really know what I wanted to read next, so I sat where I am now, but on the floor, and I looked at books around. I waited till one just sort of vibed with me, and this was the one. Do you know what this reminds me of? Cranford, of all things. Cranford being a rather sweet story about old ladies, and this being, actually, it has to be said, a rather sweet story, though you get your second suicide by page 18, and that's with an ice pick, but still, it somehow is sweet. They're both what first appear to be lots of short stories about characters who exist in an area, be it Cranford or on Cannery Row, and then, as the book goes on, they become a celebration of one of the characters in particular. And in Cranford, it's Miss Matty, and in Cannery Row, it's Doc. And they're celebrated for very similar reasons. They're celebrated because they're nice, generous, lovely people. That's a good reason to celebrate someone. And so they had a very similar structure to my mind. I don't think it was on purpose. I just think that's how it came about. And there are lots of. It's not a tightly plotted thing. It sort of feels like short stories and then builds up at the end. Where again, in both books, it's all about the characters pitching in for this special character, Doc or Matty. My favourite bits included the bit where the Dosshouse boys all hunt frogs. That was good fun, and their whole journey of hunting frogs and how Model T Fords are great because you can steal parts from other Model T Fords and they all fit together, and no one can claim that it's theirs because they all look the same, which I thought was good. And I really liked a lot of those sort of chapters. There was this one about this woman who is really good at giving tea parties and parties and things, but they have no money. So occasionally she'll cut out a picture of a ham, put that in the middle, and they'll all just go, look, there's our ham. And she has a tea party with cats. That was a good one. And yeah, it's very sweet, really. Yet there's some not sweet in there. There's like domestic abuse in there. There's at least 3 suicides. There's a dead body at one point that floats about sort of beautifully. It's sort of a thing of beauty. It's summed up really by a bit at the beginning when we're taken to a rock pool, and it describes all the creatures, and it says they're going about in their peaceful, tranquil, murderous lives, and it's that kind of peaceful, tranquil, bad part. Everyone's very poor. 3 people in it kill themselves partly because of their poverty. It's not one of the characters. He and his wife live in a thrown away boiler, and then they rent out empty pipes to other people to snore in. So, which is apparently how the book started. It was going to be about those characters. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's got this peculiar, bucolic, nostalgic, warm feeling that stops being sappy because of the, just out of this book, just away from the pages ever so slightly, there's nastiness. And so it's like a little gleaming bit of loveliness. And I really liked it. 3 books in a row I really liked. Will it hold up? Yes, it will. But in an odd way, actually, this one. I'll go into why in a bit. It's called Trustee from the Toolroom. It's a book I picked up. I don't even know why this appealed to me, to be honest. I don't know why I bought it in the first place, except maybe I needed needed some change, because I often go to a charity shop and buy a book for £1, because a book lasts longer than a pack of Haribo. Yeah. The charity shops aren't open, and I needed some pounds for the electricity. So yeah, I bought it and I started reading it. It's about a man who I would describe as boring, which is handy because I'm currently writing a book narrated by a man I'd describe as boring, and by that I mean they're probably not boring. They're just interested in the things that I find boring. They're interested in machines, and this guy is he writes for the miniature mechanic, so little model clocks, and he makes little model engines and things for a magazine, the main character. And so yeah, details. I am not a detail person. I'm a scatty, handy, wavy, big picture kind of person, really. I will look at the details if I have to, and sometimes they are interesting if I look at the details of a book or something. But in general, I'm not a details person. But he is, and so was the author. There were times where you drowned in details, but that was part of it, and that was entertaining. So there'll be a whole bit about him. He's setting a suitcase in concrete, and you get to learn about him mixing his concrete and how he's filing this down and how he's doing it to this degree and all that. And there was another bit where some people are sailing a boat, and you learn all the names of the jib and the this and the that, and everything is named. It's those people who don't say get the vacuum out. They say go get the Dyson 350 650 Hoover or whatever. Things I find boring, but it gave this really lovely mood to it, and even though sometimes I didn't know what the details referred to, I got the feeling and I got the gist of the action. And so our main character, our detail-orientated character who's never left the UK, he lives very poorly, making little models that he then takes photographs and writes step-by-step guides for a magazine. And he lives this very little life. And his sister has married a member of the aristocracy, and they are sailing a yacht to Canada, though via Tahiti. So They're going the long way around. They're going the scenic route. maybe it's too difficult to go the cold way, but they're going round and up. Maybe they've got a few jobs to do on the way. So they're sailing in the yacht, and the yacht crashes in the second chapter. It's a really good chapter. It's one of the real detailed ones, but also it's really tense because it's going to crash because it's told you in the blurb. So you're waiting and you're seeing them fending off and crash. Now our main character Nevil or Neil, Keith. See, even his name is so boring that I forgot it. His name is Keith. Keith. I've met some lovely Keiths actually. No, I've met a nice Keith. I haven't met many Keiths. You don't meet many Keiths, do you? Anyway, so there's a Keith. And he is left. He's left their daughter. He has to look after their daughter now. They're both dead. And he goes to access the fortune. It turns out that they've cleaned out their bank account, his sister and brother-in-law. And he's helped them cement this case into the boat. And he thought it was just trinkets and things, keep stuff safe for the journey. But he's been told that they bought a bunch of diamonds and smuggled them out the country. And he knows, there's a whole bunch of diamonds there. And if I'm going to raise this girl, she deserves to have the money that's left to her. In fact, I didn't like this part because they keep going, oh no, if we don't get the money, we'll have to send her to state school. Now, as a product of state school and somebody who's worked in one for 11 years, I find it a bit insulting that the big terrible thing that could happen to this person and ruin their life is to be sent to state school. Though I'm sure that's how posh people think. So, yeah, he's like, I've got to go get these diamonds. But he can't let anyone know because as soon as he lets them know, they're being pounded. And so it's about how he gets to this island off Tahiti and smuggles the diamonds out. I've given away that he succeeds in it then, but you don't really think he's not going to. And then it reminds me a bit of 80 Days, Around the World in 80 Days. It's all about how he does these things. So, what modes of transport and how they're done. And it's really quite gripping for most of it. And one of the nice things is, it turns out that there's this whole community around the world of model builders who all hang on his every word. So although he's had this little life making little models to himself, he's a big name amongst all these other people who lend a hand. And it's sort of their warmth and encouragement that get him through it. Towards the end, one of the people who who followed him and thought he was great is this really rich lumber mill owner who puts his full money and things into getting him back. And sort of in return, there's this whole stuff about where he looks at putting new pneumatic work in the lumber mill, and that gets boring, I have to say. I wasn't interested in the lumber mill subplot at the end, especially because all this exciting stuff, he's been on this boat with this guy called Jack Donnelly, who has built the boat himself, doesn't know how to read or write, or read a map, and just sails by knowing nature and knowing sailing, and that's all kind of interesting, exciting. And then this rich guy turns up and says, come and look at my lumber mill, and you're like, this is all a bit of a waste now. So yeah, it was a really good, exciting, interesting book, but there were some things about it I didn't like, despite the fact I really enjoyed the book. They didn't stop me enjoying the book. It's just when I finished the book and I thought about it, I thought, well, there's a lot of attitudes in this book I'm not very keen on. It's a very male-dominated book. When you hear that one of the characters is black, you're supposed to think, oh no, don't go with them, they're not trustworthy. And then they turn out they are. It's this amazing, oh look, even black people are competent. And that's obviously not particularly great, to put it mildly. And then there's this whole thing about the moral at the end is he gets back to his life and he lives the same life he has always led because he was happy with his life. So he doesn't need the money. He doesn't need money. He's just a good-hearted soul, and a good-hearted soul doesn't need money. So why the fuck did he go around the world all the way to get a bunch of diamonds? Like, it doesn't. He obviously needs the money because he's gone and got the money, and in fact, he's obtained some extra money for himself on the way. He wasn't trying to, but he got it. And his happiness is partially reliant on this money. So, I do a job that doesn't pay a great deal, partly because I enjoy it, and partly because I can fit the rest of my lifestyle around it. Lifestyle. That sounds so swanky. It just means reading books and going to museums and stuff. But yeah. So I could relate to him on that front. But the comfortable way he ends the book is because of the money. You can't have a book about money's not that important, which is all about the logistics of getting hold of these stolen diamonds. And also, they never go, they've been smuggling diamonds. How bad? Oh, that's fine. There were rich people who had diamonds, so they were kind of allowed to smuggle them. Well, they weren't allowed to, but we don't hate them for it. So there were a lot of attitudes behind the book which I didn't enjoy, but which didn't mar my enjoyment of the book while I read it. So yeah, so I really did enjoy it. I got through it very quickly, but then afterwards I thought I don't agree with a lot of it. So I needed a bit of a change, and I had one of my little things where I think I don't know much about that, and the thing I didn't know much about was Polari. So I got Fantabulosa. Oh no, Fabulosa. Fantabulosa is another one. Fabulosa. The story of Polari, a Britain's secret gay language. Now I knew a little bit about Polari. I knew it's where we got the word naff from. I knew that legs were lallies. I knew gay people spoke it. I thought it was more of a theatrical language, actually. I thought it was a stage language more than a gay language. Though this book's definitely about it being more of a gay language than a stage language, though it is also a stage language. Gay and stage are not mutually exclusive. And it does exactly what I want from a book like this to do. It told me just a little bit more than I wanted to know about the subject. So now my curiosity is temporarily, at least, full up about this subject, and it was really quite good. So I'm a bit of a fan of 18th century slang. Where's my 18th century slang dictionary? There's one of them. I've got a few others around there. Flash slang, canting language. Also, this sort of language comes back in the Tudor times. It's talked about in Robert Greene. A groat's worth of wit for a penny's worth of indulgence or something. It's around here somewhere. Anyway. Oh, you've gone, Robert. Oh, there you go. Groat's worth of wit bought with a million of repentance, describing folly of youth and falsehood of makeshift flatterers, etc. It's called a coney catching manual. It's all about how you can get robbers and how robbers work, and then catching them out and their dialect, which brings us back to this. So this starts off as a thieves dialect, and it becomes like a travelling salesman dialect, and it gets fed in from Italian travelling people, a little bit of Romany, though not as much Romany as sometimes is said, and then it develops like this, pulling in bits of London slang, back slang, like yob is a back slang word, meaning boy. Cockney rhyming slang, things like that. And then it becomes, throughout sort of towards the end of the war, World War II, and into the 50s, it becomes a gay language. And at this point, being gay, or certainly homosexual acts, are arrest-worthy offences. And so having a language for secret is part of it, but also part of it is we have our language, this is our gang. It's like a feeling of membership to speak Polari together. And then it talks about history as it went on. It became a little bit more mainstream when Round the Horn, the radio series, did these sketches, Julian and Sandy, and that used Polari words, and then it became something that gay people didn't want to to associate themselves with, because Polari is camp and it's effeminate and butch was all the rage. And then now people are beginning to reassess it and to take bits that they want from it. It's not coming back as a language, but it is coming back as sort of a cultural touchstone, particularly amongst gay people looking at their history and stuff, which is all very interesting. The bits I found most interesting were about how it worked. It keeps arguing it's a whole language, because if you read a bit of sort of solid Polari, you wouldn't understand it without having to translate it. I disagree. I mean, this guy's a linguistic professor with a specialisation in Polari, and I'm just a guy sitting here. But I disagree only because it felt to me like it couldn't express that much. It was good at sharing gossip, at sharing warnings, at looking at handsome men and going, oh, like them, and things like that. But I don't think it would work as a language. It's not an emotional language. It's a performance language of playfulness and bitchiness and things like that, as far as I saw it when I was reading this. I'm trying to find a good solid bit of Polari just so you can hear some. I mean, the Sandy and Julian's sketches all started with, "Oh, hello, Mr. Foothorn. How bonner to Varda your dolly old eek," which Varda, you get Varda a lot. I can't find a good solid section for you. I really should prepare these videos better. And then at the end you get a dictionary. But again, I don't know how this is language so much. Billingsgate meaning bad language. Well, that's from old slang. That's old as Billingsgate language. So you've got omni-polonies, which are gay people, and then poloni-omnis, which are lesbians. And then you've got omnis, which are men, and polonies, which are women. It was very interesting. I very much enjoyed it. As I say, it did what I wanted. It told me just a bit more than I want to know. I now don't really want to know much more about Polari for a while. That itch has been scratched, and it was very interesting, and I liked it. Finally, then, with the Samuel Johnson reading group, we've been reading another play. We've been reading Wild Oats by John O'Keefe, which is another one in this selection. And Wild Oats is way funnier than The Clandestine Marriage. It has proper jokes with setups and punchlines and things, and it has really fun characters. Everyone gets to play someone fun. So I'm playing this guy called Rover, who is an out-of-work actor, or occasionally working actor. I think he's the main character, which is fun, but he can't express himself unless it's through theatre quotes, which means that most of the characters don't understand what he's saying, and actually, which means sometimes I don't understand what he's saying either, because some of the theatre quotes are from plays that are a bit, they've fallen out of the repertoire, let us say, though a lot of it's Shakespeare, which lives forever. So yeah, he talks by quotes, and he breezes in everywhere and stirs things up. My favourite character, though, is this guy called John Dory, who is this seaman who's now working as a valet de chambre, and he speaks almost completely in naval slang, and he's very grumpy, and he's a very, very bad servant, because he's just, well, I didn't want to do it. He's good, I like him a lot. There's this other guy called Ephraim Smooth, and he's a Quaker, and he speaks in these and thys and biblical allusions, and he is a right misery, but in a way that's very funny. And the whole thing is very good. We're going to finish it next Tuesday, which incidentally is my birthday, which is quite a nice time to finish it. And so yeah, that's June. As usual at the end of one of these videos, I feel like I've just been gabbling, but I hope you've got something out of it. I certainly have. I've very much enjoyed my reading this month, and I look forward to next month. See you then.